Hi, I'm Phil McCauley, Vice Chair of Labour Business, and today I'm joined by Bill Esterson MP, the new Shadow Minister for International Trade. Hi Bill, how are you?
Hello Phil, thanks for doing this, and it's good to talk to you. This is a new way of working for all of us, of course, or most of us, and I'm certainly very well. Family are all well, but we certainly face a tough set of challenges, and we're getting stuck into it.
Well, you've just come in, thanks Bill, you've just come in your new role in Keir Starmer's new shadow governmental setup. Now, tell us a little bit about the role first of all, and then we'll talk about how it relates to COVID right now in business and what they need to think about presently.
Well, I'm one of the shadow ministers in the international trade team, where Emily Thornberry is the shadow cabinet member. So we're shadowing Liz Truss and her team, and international trade will become increasingly important as a domestic competence, because you'll remember that as members of the European Union, all international trade arrangements have been handled through the EU for over 40 years. So this is something where we lack expertise in the UK, and it's something we're going to have to catch up on very fast as we sign new agreements and negotiate a new arrangement, especially with our biggest trading partner, the EU. So that is work that is ongoing, even in the middle of the crisis. Of course, we're also in transition from Brexit, and that very much looms large over what's going on, with the government saying we're not considering extending transition. There is much to be done.
It's quite an extraordinary time, I think we can agree, and certainly COVID-19 is being a huge crisis and a tragedy for the country. And how are the government going to be able to balance the two requirements? On the one hand, dealing with this crisis, and on the other hand, thinking about the other crisis that faces Britain, which is the prospect of a hard Brexit at the end of the transitional year?
Well, you're right. The COVID-19 crisis is absolutely huge, and the economic data so far shows the biggest contraction in the economy since records began, effectively, already appearing on the horizon if it hasn't already hit us. And recovering from that is going to be an enormous challenge, and it's going to have to be led by how we trade around the world, albeit for quite some time to come, under very challenging circumstances where this virus is still going to present challenges around how we keep ourselves distant and how we avoid continuing to spread the virus and cause continuing health problems. Now, you mentioned Brexit. That had already, because of the uncertainty around it, quite apart from the economic damage to be done by separating from being part of the biggest trading bloc in the world, and the economic benefits that we had from our membership of the EU, that was already causing uncertainty for business, a massive loss of foreign direct investment into the UK, and real concerns right across industry, through services, manufacturing, and of course with many workers too, whose situation was put really at risk by the lack of support from the government, particularly for EU nationals who were working in the UK. We can just add a third crisis, which is the existential threat of the climate crisis. And I think we had reached a point where most people, I think most businesses, the investment community too, had recognised just how important it was that we had a very detailed and urgent plan on how we decarbonised our economy. So actually, I think there's three crises, one laying on each laying on top of the others, that needed addressing. And certainly we have to get through the coronavirus crisis as best we can. That is an enormous undertaking, but then we have these other challenges ahead of us too.
Yeah, you're quite right. And of course, it's how's it manifesting in your own constituency in Sefton Central?
Well, my staff and I are all working from home. We are inundated with people who have real concerns about their health, the health of their friends and family. Sadly, I'm sure like everybody else, I know people who are either seriously ill or have died. And it really is starting to get home to people just how dangerous this virus is. Everyday life is completely changed. And I don't think we're ever going to go back to the way things used to be. But from a financial point of view, very many businesses struggling to see a future. The government measures, which I think were broadly the right policy decisions, have turned out to be extremely difficult to implement, in part due to the nature and scale and speed of the crisis and the need for action, but also because of the fundamental structures that we have in place. We couldn't go from a situation where the public realm had been cut to the bone for 10 years and then expect workers in public services to be in a position to deliver, whether that's the grants for businesses through local government or the job retention scheme through HMRC, or through making sure that the banks played their part with the right relationship between government and the finance industry in putting in place the loan schemes, the various loan schemes for different sizes of businesses. So I am, like every other MP in the country, hearing daily of people really struggling financially as well with health. And we are doing our best to navigate and to try and point them in the right direction. And a lot of our work is about the very, very difficult situations faced by essential workers who don't have the proper PPE. You know, some horrendous stories of workers in care homes, for example, who are told they don't need PPE because no one in the care home is showing symptoms. Sadly, I'm hearing days or weeks later that those symptoms have started and people have started dying in the same care homes. Now, it's obvious that that was going to happen, and we've just had such poor information, and I'm afraid the government simply hasn't got a lot of these things right, whether that's on the health front or on the business front. And our job as opposition MPs has often been to put the pressure on, not out of a partisan political desire to catch the government out, but because we're trying to save lives. And in the end, the priority has to be trying to get the government to change tack where they haven't got it right in the past, so that we get it right going forward. So whether that's getting PPE, the level of testing, the very, very high level of testing that's going to be needed, all the financial packages, all of those things are brought to me day to day by my constituents. And whether I'm helping individuals, constituents, or working with my colleagues, it amounts to the same thing, which is trying to get the government to get these things right so that people have the support that they need.
Thanks. Now, Keir Starmer's spoken a lot about the government's needing to come forward with an exit plan for how we're going to move forward past the peak and into a safe transition back into the workforce. What's your sense of that at the moment, and how do we hold the government to account whilst remaining supportive in the eye of the national crisis?
Yes, and it is important that we are as supportive as possible, because we want the government to succeed. We want them to save as many lives as possible. We want them to protect our frontline staff in the health and care sectors in particular, but that's true in food distribution and retail. It's true for the police, the fire service, the armed services, and council staff. You know, our refuse workers need protection just as much as anybody else for the marvellous job that they're doing. So it's really important that we are working with the government, but it's also essential that we say when things aren't right, we say where we think things can be improved, and that's the job that we've been performing. And I'm afraid when the government isn't responding effectively to feedback, then we have to shout a little louder, and that's one of the things that we've started to do more and more, because this issue about PPE, the shortage of testing, these things need to be sorted out, because they are fundamental to, firstly, how we reduce the death toll as much as possible, but secondly, how we escape from the crisis and then the pandemic. So it's absolutely right that we are playing the role we are, and it's absolutely right that, as Keir has done, he calls for the plans to be set out so people can start to understand how this might end. It's not the same as saying we need a date for when we can come out of lockdown, because nobody can give that date at the moment. But we do need to know how it will happen, what level of testing and what testing arrangements will need to be in place so that those who can go back to work do so, but are able to be tested, so that those who are caring for the rest of us can do so knowing that they will be tested and that they can both look after their own health and make sure that they're not infecting others. And so that, you know, life can start to move forward, the economy can start to pick up again. And that will need a lot of planning and it will need a lot of work, but the fundamentals have got to be in place of protection to do that. And that's where Keir is absolutely right to call for the government to set in place how it intends to achieve those important milestones. And at that stage, perhaps we'll be in a position to understand better when it is we're likely to be able to come out of lockdown.
Thanks, Bill. That's great. So finally, I just wanted to ask you, I mean, what's your message of kind of hope and support for the British business community right now? I mean, we've heard a lot from you about the problems that we're facing. Are you optimistic for the future? How will we cope with the recession that we're in and coming out of it? What's your message?
Well, I think we have to be honest with people. This is going to be incredibly difficult. We see that for many businesses, and my wife's business is one of these, there is no work. And that's why the measures put in place were important and they have to be implemented properly. But as time goes on, as we understand when some kind of exit might be possible, I think people need to start planning. I think one of the messages would be, use this time to make plans, use this time to think about how you might do things better than you were doing before. And use this time to influence policymakers, whether that's Labour business or people like me, about what you think is going to be needed for the economy to pick up. Because we are going to have to recover. We are going to need our businesses to thrive once again. And we are going to need to rebuild our economy as quickly and as effectively as possible. It is going to be hugely challenging, but I think we also need to look at what will be important. So it will be important that we trade internationally. It will be important that we have an export-led recovery for this country, that we look at how we trade around the world, how we trade with our nearest neighbours, our biggest market, the European Union, as well as elsewhere in the world. It will be important that we link that export strategy with our domestic industrial strategy, and that we build on the excellent service economy that we have in the UK. So some of the issues, many of the issues, will be similar to the ones we're familiar with in the debates that we've had around Brexit, and we will need to address them again. So use this time wisely, use it to plan, use it to prepare, and use it to influence. But the time will come where things are better, and we have to look to that time. And there's no time like the present in planning for that eventuality.
Bill Esterson, thank you very much for your time today with Labour Business. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Cheers for now.
Thank you. Stay safe.